You're nothing, Ethan. I can replace you in an hour. Those were the last words Lydia whispered before tossing her wedding ring onto the table and walking out of our home, her heels clicking like a countdown to war. She had no idea that the man she just dismissed as nothing was already setting in motion a chain of events that would turn her proud smirk into public humiliation. What followed wasn't just heartbreak, it was poetic justice written in real time. Viewers, have you ever had someone look you in the eye and tell you you're worthless, only for life to prove them wrong in ways they could never imagine? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Subscribe, like, comment and watch till the ending to share this interesting story to family and friends. I'm going to destroy you in court, Ethan. Half of everything you've built will be mine by Christmas. That was the last thing Lydia said before slamming the door of our penthouse, her perfume still lingering in the air like a cruel reminder that love can rot faster than fruit in the sun. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood there, hands trembling slightly, staring at the indent her heels left in the carpet. It wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, Lydia was the woman who believed in me when no investor would touch my software startup. We shared instant noodles on nights when the rent was due and laughed about building empires from our shoebox apartment. I wrote code while she drew marketing sketches on napkins. We were partners, at least I thought so. But success changes people differently. When our company finally hit its stride and the numbers climbed, Lydia's laughter changed pitch. It was still beautiful but colder, sharper, like the sound of glass before it breaks. She stopped calling me babe and started calling me Ethan. She said it sounded more professional. At first, I blamed the workload. Then I noticed the new dresses, the late meetings, the perfume she only wore when she wanted attention. I wanted to believe it was stress, not betrayal. Then came Victor Hayes, my former mentor, the man who taught me everything about venture capital and betrayal. The night I first suspected them, it was raining. Funny how storms always seem to accompany betrayal, even though I swore not every story begins that way. I had stayed late at the office debugging code when I saw a text flash on Lydia's phone as she left it on the desk. He'll never see it coming. I tried to laugh it off, but something in my gut twisted. That was 3 months before she handed me divorce papers and threatened court. Now, as I stood alone in the echoing penthouse, I replayed every smile that had preceded a lie. My lawyer had warned me she wanted not just money, but control. She wanted my company. Our company. I walked to the balcony. The city sprawled beneath me in flickering neon. Each light looked like an accusation. I took a slow breath. Rage was easy. But what I felt was colder, something calculated. Lydia thought she knew every move I'd make. She thought she could predict me because she'd built her illusions on who I used to be, the man who forgave, who fixed things, who avoided fights. But I'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this. Quietly. Patiently. She wanted half of everything I built. She didn't realize I'd already built something new. Something she couldn't touch. And by Christmas, she wouldn't just lose half. She'd lose everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, the city lights leaking through the blinds, laptop open to a folder titled Project Sentinel, a name Lydia didn't even know existed. Most people thought my company, Echelon Systems, only developed data visualization software. That was the public face. The real money, the future, was hidden beneath layers of encryption, a prototype artificial intelligence system that could analyze behavioral patterns from digital footprints. I had been building it for a year in secret, testing quietly, documenting nothing. Lydia believed she owned 50% of everything visible. Sentinel was invisible. I leaned back, staring at the line of code pulsing on my screen like a heartbeat. It was more than a program, it was my exit plan. If Lydia and Victor were as arrogant as I thought, they'd reveal themselves soon. And when they did, Sentinel would record everything. Around 3 a.m., I received an email from Naomi Chin, my lead developer and the only person I still trusted. Server logs show external pings from an unregistered IP linked to Victor's firm. You were right. Someone's probing our cloud. I smiled, not out of joy but confirmation. Lydia wasn't patient, she was desperate. I replied quickly. Let them in. Mirror their access. Track everything. And don't tell anyone. Naomi didn't question me. She never did. She'd seen what betrayal could do when it had my name attached. As the sun broke over the skyline, I made coffee and stared at the framed photo of Lydia and me at our first investor gala. She was radiant in that red dress, her hand on my chest, whispering that we'd build an empire together. I remember believing her. I remember thinking she meant us. But now, looking at that photo, I saw what I had missed, the calculation in her eyes. The way she angled toward the camera, not toward me. Even then, she was performing for a future audience. Later that morning my lawyer called. Ethan, she's filed an emergency injunction to freeze the company's main assets until divorce proceedings are finalized. I stayed silent for a moment, staring at the line of steam rising from my coffee. That's fine, I said finally. Freeze what she can see. He hesitated. You sound too calm. You have a plan, don't you? Let's just say, I replied, I've learned the value of patience. After the call, I opened a hidden console window. Sentinel's logs flashed live, recording every unauthorized query, every trace Lydia's team left behind. I watched as the data began painting patterns, threads leading to one IP then another. When the system flagged Victor's home network, I almost laughed. It was too easy. They weren't stealing my company. They were building the evidence I'd used to destroy them, legally, publicly, and poetically. But revenge is never clean. Even then, as I watched their betrayal unfold line by line on my screen, a small voice whispered from somewhere buried deep. You still loved her once. I shut the laptop. Love had already done enough damage. 3 days later I saw her again, Lydia, walking out of Victor's building. She wore a white blazer, her hair tied back like she was heading into a board meeting, but her laughter. God, her laughter was loud enough to slice through traffic. I sat in my car across the street, engine idling, rain misting against the windshield. It wasn't stalking, it was clarity. I needed to see with my own eyes what kind of woman could erase a marriage so fast and so easily. Victor came out a moment later, hand brushing her lower back, just enough to make my stomach turn. She didn't pull away. She leaned into him. Like I'd never existed. I could have stormed over, confronted them, made a scene. But anger is a short-term weapon. I needed something that would last. As I watched, Lydia's phone buzzed. She checked it and frowned, her expression tightening. That was my text. Me, hope you enjoy your lunch with Victor. Tell him he still owes me from last quarter's failed pitch. Her eyes darted around the street. Then she saw my car. For a moment the world froze, traffic, sound, even time. Just her eyes and mine. She looked terrified. Not because I'd caught her, but because she realized something far worse. I wasn't broken. I was watching. Calm. Controlled. Predictable. Ethan was gone. She grabbed Victor's arm and hurried him inside. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Sentinel had already started feeding me breadcrumbs, voice notes, file transfers, meeting logs. And one of those logs contained something that changed everything. A reference to Project Arc. Arc wasn't my project. It was mine and Lydia's joint patent, the one we developed together before our marriage fell apart. I had left it dormant, waiting for future funding. But she and Victor had resurrected it, presenting it to investors as their creation. My name wasn't even on it. That night I called Naomi again. Pull everything we have on Project Arkansas, emails, drafts, timestamps. I want proof that I authored the original framework. Naomi hesitated. Ethan, this could get ugly. If Lydia's pitching your design as her own, that's corporate fraud. That's the point, I said, my voice steady. Let her dig the grave herself. After hanging up, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window. Across the street, the apartment lights flickered. It was almost poetic how easily people revealed their true selves when they thought no one was watching. I replayed her words again. You're nothing. I can replace you in an hour. She was wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was the storm she never saw coming. But beneath the rage, a strange ache lingered, not for her but for the man I used to be. The man who thought love was unbreakable. The man who believed partnership meant trust. That version of me had died the night she walked away. The man left behind was building something else. Not a company, not a product, but a reckoning. A week later, Lydia called me. Her number flashing on my screen felt like seeing a ghost. Something once warm, now just cold memory. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is a cruel addiction. Ethan, she began, her tone rehearsed and smooth, we need to talk about the asset freeze. I smiled faintly, leaning back in my chair. We don't need to talk about anything, Lydia. You already made your move. She sighed, that same performative exhale she used whenever she wanted to sound patient. This doesn't have to get ugly. You know I worked just as hard to build Echelon as you did. Right? I said. Between your yoga retreats and designer meetings. Her voice hardened. I'm serious. I have lawyers ready to file for full control if you don't cooperate. I chuckled. Then go ahead. Just remember, every system has a backdoor. There was a pause. Then a sharp shift in her tone. What does that mean? Nothing, I said. Just something I learned from someone who thought they were smarter than me. She hung up. I stared at my reflection in the laptop screen for a moment. My hands were steady but my pulse wasn't. The call hadn't rattled me because of her threats. It was because I realized how easy it was becoming to sound like her. Later that night, I met Naomi at a quiet diner. She slid a flash drive across the table. All emails, designs, and timestamps from the original Project Arc files. It's airtight. You can prove everything. I nodded. Good. I need one more thing, financial trail from Lydia's new company. Naomi frowned. You mean the shell one she opened with Victor? Exactly. The one using stolen Arc data. She hesitated. Ethan, if you leak this or push it too hard, it's not just revenge anymore. It's war. I looked her dead in the eyes. She declared war the moment she decided I was disposable. That night I couldn't sleep again. I opened Sentinel's live log feed, the one that had been quietly watching Lydia's moves for weeks. Her latest emails appeared one by one. Victor, we can't afford to delay the investor meeting. Don't worry. Ethan's too focused on the divorce to realize what we've done. He's harmless. That last line made me laugh. Harmless. They'd stolen from me, lied to me, tried to erase me, and now they were betting everything on my silence. But what they didn't know, what Lydia had completely underestimated, was that I had a habit of documenting everything. Every message, every draft, every login, every lie. I wasn't planning revenge anymore. I was setting the stage for karma. And karma, I had learned, doesn't come quietly. It arrives with proof. 2 weeks passed. The divorce proceedings were moving faster than I expected, which meant Lydia and Victor were confident. Overconfident. My lawyer, Bennett, had warned me during our last meeting, they're pushing for mediation, Ethan. They think you'll cave to avoid public scandal. I smiled. Let them think that. Because scandal wasn't something I feared anymore, it was something I could weaponize. That morning I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice, smooth and self-assured. Ethan, this is Victor. Let's cut the drama. Lydia tells me you're being difficult. Difficult? I said. You mean not letting two thieves walk away with my company? He chuckled. Your former company. Look, man, we both know business is about leverage. You lost yours the moment she left. Take the settlement, save your dignity. There was a long silence. Then I said quietly, you know what I love about leverage, Victor? It changes hands fast. He laughed. Sure, buddy. Keep dreaming. When he hung up, I opened my encrypted drive. Naomi's flash drive was already plugged in, and Sentinel had finished processing weeks of surveillance data. The results were beautiful, time-stamped emails, proof of stolen code, false signatures, and a trail of redirected investor funds leading straight to Victor's company account. I stared at the evidence. It was more than enough to destroy them. But a clean win wasn't enough. Lydia had built her world on appearances, wealth, admiration, control. If I wanted karma to hurt, I had to strip away the illusion. So I waited. 3 days later, the Arc Tech Investor Conference began. Lydia and Victor were headlining it, promoting their breakthrough software that, ironically, was my work under a different name. Cameras flashed, journalists gathered, and Lydia glowed in her white dress, smiling like she'd already won. I watched the live stream from my office. She looked beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. A perfection that only existed when she was lying. When Victor took the stage, he said, "This is the future of AI-driven analytics, Project Arkansas." The audience applauded. Investors nodded. Lydia smiled wider. And then, at that perfect moment, Sentinel executed its final command. The presentation screen flickered. For a moment, Victor's slideshow froze. Then, line by line, their private emails began appearing across the massive LED screen. If Ethan ever finds out we stole his prototype, we're done. Don't worry, I'll make sure he's too broken to fight back. He still thinks I love him, pathetic. Gasps filled the hall. Lydia's face went pale. Cameras turned toward her as whispers spread like wildfire. Victor tried to pull the plug, but it was too late. Every device in the building had been synced. Their secrets were public. Their empire shattered. I leaned back in my chair, the live stream reflecting in my glasses. Lydia once told me I was replaceable in an hour. Turns out, it only took her 15 minutes to lose everything. The fallout was instant and merciless. Within hours, every major business outlet had the story splashed across their front pages. Arc Tech scandal. Co-founders accused of intellectual theft. Lydia Evans and Victor Hale exposed in live conference leak. The clip of Lydia's frozen expression, eyes wide, trembling lips, fingers clutching the mic, looped endlessly across the internet. She had spent years cultivating an image of grace and brilliance, and now that image was burning. By noon, Victor's firm had suspended all trading activity. Investors were withdrawing faster than I thought possible. My phone buzzed every few seconds with messages from old colleagues, reporters, even old college friends I hadn't heard from in years. "Ethan, was that your doing?" one text read. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched a shaky live stream of Lydia walking out of the conference building, cameras flashing, people shouting her name, not out of admiration but accusation. Her perfect composure cracked. She stumbled as reporters pushed closer, asking, "Did you steal from your husband? Were you behind the data breach?" For a moment, I felt something twist in my chest. Not pity, just recognition. That's what happens when you believe you're untouchable. That evening, I met Naomi at the same diner. She slid a tablet across the table. "It's done. The servers traced back to Victor's company. You're officially cleared of any breach allegations." "But..." She hesitated. "But what?" "Lydia's company filed for bankruptcy protection this afternoon. She's losing everything. Even her apartment." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the steam rising from my coffee, watching it curl and vanish. Naomi studied me carefully. "You got what you wanted, Ethan. Why do you still look empty?" I didn't have an answer, because part of me thought victory would feel different. I expected fireworks, catharsis. But instead there was just silence, a heavy, endless silence. Later that night as I drove home, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Lydia's number. I hesitated before playing it. Her voice was soft, broken. "Ethan, please. You've made your point. I have nothing left. Victor's gone. Investors are suing. I can't even walk outside without being called a thief. I know I said things I shouldn't have, but please, I need help. Just one call back." I sat there in the dark, the city humming quietly around me. Once upon a time, I would have rushed to her side. I would have believed her tears, her trembling voice. But that Ethan no longer existed. I deleted the voicemail. As the message vanished, I whispered to myself, "Karma doesn't need permission. It just needs time." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Not the kind that brings storms, but the kind that clears the air after one. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not triumph. Just peace. 2 weeks after the conference disaster, Lydia showed up at my office. No call. No text. No warning. When my assistant buzzed in, whispering, "Sir, your ex-wife is here," I felt a strange stillness settle over me. Like time had paused to see what I'd do next. She walked in wearing the same blazer she once wore to pitch investors, but now it looked oversized, her makeup uneven, her confidence stripped away. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "You have 30 seconds. Make them count." Her lips quivered. I don't know where else to go. Everyone's cut me off. The board froze my accounts. I can't even pay for a lawyer." I said nothing. She took a shaky breath. "I know what I did. I was greedy. I thought Victor..." She stopped, her voice cracking. "I thought he cared. But the moment everything crashed, he disappeared. He sold his shares and vanished to Singapore." I stayed silent, watching her struggle to hold eye contact. For the first time, there was no manipulation in her expression, just raw, human panic. "I was wrong about you," she whispered. "You weren't weak, Ethan. You were kind. And I mistook kindness for weakness." Something twisted inside me again. Not pity, memory. The memory of all the nights I'd stayed up late, working to give her the life she said she deserved. The memory of her laughing while I drowned in stress. The memory of her voice saying, "You're nothing." "You know," I said quietly, I used to replay those words in my head. "You're nothing." I wondered what made you say them. Was it anger? Ego? Or just cruelty? Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I cut in. "And that's fine. You meant every word. But now you get to see what nothing can do when it stops caring." She covered her face, sobbing. "Please? I've lost everything. I don't even have a home." I stood up slowly, walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. "You built your life on lies, Lydia. You gambled love for luxury, truth for attention, loyalty for control. And you lost. That's not my doing, that's karma." She didn't respond. Just silence, broken, fragile silence. When I turned back, she was already at the door. Before leaving, she said, "You were right, Ethan. Karma doesn't come quietly." The door closed behind her. I stood there for a long time, watching her reflection fade from the glass. Part of me wanted to hate her. Another part just wanted to finally stop remembering her. And for the first time, I truly began to. A month passed. Life started to feel almost normal again, quieter but heavier in places I hadn't realized were broken. The media storm around Lydia and Victor had faded, replaced by newer scandals. But the internet never forgets. Every search of her name still brought up the same humiliation: the leaked emails, the conference chaos, the betrayal. Sometimes I caught myself wondering where she was sleeping, whether she'd found a job, whether she was okay. Then I'd remember how she once looked me in the eyes and said, "I can replace you in an hour," and the sympathy would dissolve. One evening I stayed late at the office finishing a report. Naomi stopped by holding 2 coffees. "You're still here?" I smiled faintly. Old habits. Hard to kill. She handed me 1 cup and leaned on the desk. "You ever think about what comes next? You've already won, Ethan." "Winning isn't the same as healing," I said quietly. "Some parts of me still feel stuck in that night, the night she walked out." Naomi nodded. "Then maybe it's time to let the past walk out too." Her words lingered after she left. For months my life had revolved around revenge. Planning it, executing it, watching it unfold. Now that it was over, I didn't know who I was without it. Later that night I took a walk through downtown. The city had a way of swallowing noise, honking cars, laughter, conversations, until all that remained was a low hum that matched the rhythm of your thoughts. I passed by the old cafe where Lydia and I used to go on Sundays. The place was empty except for a barista cleaning the counter. And then I saw her. Lydia. Sitting alone in the corner by the window, wearing a faded coat, her hair pulled back, no makeup. A half-empty cup of coffee sat in front of her. She looked nothing like the woman I used to know, and yet, heartbreakingly, everything like the one I once loved. Our eyes met for a second. She froze, lips parting slightly, like she didn't expect to ever see me again. I walked past the window without stopping. But something inside me twisted. Not guilt, not pity. Just a quiet understanding that she was finally living the life she'd built. One without masks, one where her reflection finally matched her reality. I stopped at the corner, looked back once more, and saw her staring down at her phone, motionless. For a long moment I thought about walking back, maybe saying something, anything. Then I turned away. You can forgive someone and still never let them back in. And that's when I realized, revenge had never been about destroying her. It was about reclaiming the version of myself she tried to erase. That night I slept peacefully, for the first time in a year. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, cutting across my desk like a quiet invitation to start over. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of yesterday clinging to me. I brewed coffee not out of routine but because I actually wanted to taste it. It's strange how after chaos silence feels foreign. You keep waiting for the next betrayal, the next argument, the next tremor under your feet. But nothing came. Only calm. Weeks turned into months. I poured my energy into rebuilding the company not for the sake of dominance but to create something meaningful, something resilient. The board trusted me again. Employees who had once whispered now walked into my office with confidence. It was like the whole organization was healing alongside me. Naomi became more than just my assistant. She became a constant reminder that loyalty still existed. One evening we were reviewing a project proposal when she said softly, "You ever think you might be holding back, Ethan? You talk about moving on, but I can see you still look over your shoulder sometimes." I didn't answer right away. She was right. Part of me still measured every new connection against the memory of betrayal, like I was afraid to let anyone close enough to break me again. But something in Naomi's tone, steady, sincere, made me want to try. "Maybe I'm still learning how," I admitted. "It's easier to rebuild a company than to rebuild trust." She smiled faintly. "Then start small. Coffee that's not for work. Conversations that aren't about strategy." The simplicity of her suggestion made me laugh, and somehow, it also made my chest feel lighter. Over time we started doing just that. Dinners that weren't planned, late-night walks after meetings, moments of silence that didn't feel awkward. She never pushed, she just showed up again and again with quiet steadiness. One night as we left the office together she turned to me and said, "You know, people talk about revenge like it's power. But sometimes forgiveness, even silent forgiveness, is what really sets you free." Her words echoed long after she drove away. I thought of Lydia, wherever she was, and realized I no longer felt bitterness. She was a closed chapter, a scar that no longer hurt when touched. The next morning I took down the last framed photo of us that I'd kept hidden in a drawer, not out of sentiment but as proof of how far I'd come. I slipped it into an envelope and tossed it into the shred bin. It didn't feel like losing something. It felt like breathing again. For the first time in a long while I wasn't surviving. I was living. And as the city stretched awake beyond my window, I felt an unfamiliar emotion rise quietly inside me: peace. Months later, I stood in front of the city skyline from the balcony of my new apartment. The air was crisp, the city alive, but for once I wasn't racing it. I'd stopped chasing ghosts. The company had stabilized, stronger, more ethical, and respected. Investors who once hesitated now called with offers. But the victory didn't feel like it used to. It wasn't about proving Lydia wrong anymore. It was about finally proving to myself that I could stand without her shadow. One afternoon, while reviewing files, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen froze me for a second: Lydia. It had been a year since the trial. I almost didn't pick up. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me swipe. Her voice was weaker, thinner than I remembered. "Ethan, I'm not calling to fight. I just needed to say I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy. Not angry, just quiet. "I know what I did destroyed everything," she continued, her breath shaky. "I lost everything, the house, the money, even him. He left when the truth came out. I'm working at a cafe now, trying to start over. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I regret it." I looked out at the horizon. Once her voice could shatter me. Now it just echoed and faded like a song I no longer remembered the lyrics to. "You don't owe me an apology," I said calmly. "But I hope you find peace, Lydia. Because I already have." She didn't respond for a while. I could almost hear her swallow her tears. "You always were stronger than me," she whispered. Then the line went dead. I stood there, phone still in hand, and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a strange kind of acceptance. That night I told Naomi about the call. She didn't say anything at first, just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said. "Forgiving her doesn't mean forgetting. It means you're finally free." I nodded slowly. Maybe that's what healing really is, not erasing the past but outgrowing it. She smiled. "Exactly." Outside, the rain started, not the heavy kind that drowns the city, but a soft drizzle that felt almost cleansing. I watched droplets slide down the glass, blurring the lights of the city below, and realized that the story of my pain had turned into something else, a story of endurance, of growth. As I turned away from the window, I caught my reflection. The man staring back at me wasn't broken anymore. He was whole. And though I didn't know where life would lead next, for once I didn't need to. I'd already won the only battle that mattered, the one inside me. A year later, everything about my life looked different. Quieter, steadier, but fuller. The chaos that once defined my days had been replaced by something rare: peace. I had stopped waking up haunted by old conversations or by Lydia's laughter echoing in my head. I didn't crave revenge anymore. I craved meaning. Naomi had become more than a friend, she was my anchor. What started as two broken people helping each other heal turned into something I never expected. Love that didn't come with lies or ego but calm assurance. One evening, as we walked through the same park where I used to sit in silence months after Lydia left, Naomi looked up at me and said, "You ever think about what would have happened if Lydia never cheated?" I smiled faintly. "All the time. But I don't think we'd be here if she hadn't. Sometimes, the worst heartbreak sets you up for the right kind of happiness." She laughed softly, her eyes glinting in the amber light. "You sound like a philosopher now." "Maybe pain turns you into one," I said. We sat by the fountain where I once drowned in thoughts of betrayal. Now it just looked peaceful. I could finally look at the water without seeing Lydia's reflection. A young couple nearby was arguing, quietly but emotionally. I caught snippets of their words. "You don't appreciate me. You think I'm replaceable." Those words hit me like a ghost from the past. Naomi noticed the way my face tensed and rested her head on my shoulder. "Let it go," she whispered. "I already did," I said, surprising myself with how true it sounded. Later that week I received an invitation. It was for a university entrepreneurship conference. Apparently they wanted me as a keynote speaker. The theme? Rebuilding after ruin. I laughed when I read it. Life really did have a way of circling back. During my speech I shared my story, not the gossip version that once trended online but the truth. I talked about betrayal, loss, and how failure can either harden you or refine you. At one point I said, when someone tells you you're replaceable, it's often because they're terrified of their own emptiness. Don't fight to prove your worth to them. Build a life so solid that even your silence makes noise. The room went still. Then came the applause, loud, raw, real. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of betrayal. I felt like a survivor who had turned his scars into something useful. After the event, a student approached me, nervous, teary-eyed. "Sir," she said, "your story saved me. I was going through something similar, and I was about to give up." That moment hit harder than any revenge ever could. I realized Lydia's betrayal wasn't my ending, it was the beginning of my purpose. As Naomi met me outside, smiling proudly, I knew the final chapter of that painful story was already written. But I could sense another story beginning, one that wasn't born from pain but from peace. The last time I saw Lydia was completely unexpected. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Naomi and I were at a small charity event downtown, a fundraiser for single parents and abuse survivors. I had become one of the sponsors not for publicity but because I knew what it felt like to rebuild from the ashes. We were helping hand out boxes of food and supplies when I noticed her, Lydia. She looked almost unrecognizable. Her once glossy hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, her designer clothes replaced by a plain uniform. She was volunteering too, standing beside an older woman and quietly sorting items into bags. For a second, time froze. I half expected my old bitterness to rise again, the anger, the resentment, the sting of her words, "You're nothing. I can replace you in an hour." But none of that came. Instead I felt peace. She noticed me eventually. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and then she froze like she didn't know whether to approach or turn away. Naomi followed my gaze and immediately understood. "That's her, isn't it?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Naomi didn't say a word, she just gave my hand a gentle squeeze and walked to help another group, giving me space. Lydia hesitated, then walked over, clutching the strap of her bag nervously. "Ethan, I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't think I'd see you either," I said softly. She looked down, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to fix things. Not with money, with myself. I volunteer here every week. I thought maybe if I gave something back, I could undo at least a little of the damage I caused." I studied her face. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone finally confronting her own emptiness. There was no makeup to hide behind, no arrogance in her tone, just truth. "I'm glad you're doing that," I said quietly. "We both learned, didn't we? Pain teaches better than comfort ever could." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering. "You really did move on." "I had to," I replied. "And I'm thankful I did." She took a deep breath, then whispered, "You were always enough, Ethan. I just didn't see it until I lost everything." I nodded. Maybe that's what karma really is, not punishment but the mirror that shows us who we truly were. A long silence followed. Then she smiled through her tears. "I'm glad you found peace." "So am I." We parted without hatred, without tension, just quiet closure. Later that day, as Naomi and I drove home, she asked softly, "Are you okay?" I looked at her, then out the window at the golden sunset washing over the city, the same city where my heart once broke and healed again. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I think I finally understand why everything had to happen exactly the way it did." She smiled. "And what's that?" "Because sometimes," I said, watching the light fade into night, "karma isn't about revenge, it's about redemption." I reached over and held her hand, feeling a calm certainty settle in my chest. Lydia was just a chapter. Naomi, peace and purpose, they were the story. And as the city lights shimmered ahead, I realized I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was walking toward everything I was meant to be. Subscribe, like, comment and share for more interesting stories.